Hello everyone and welcome back to Trekyards. I'm Captain Foley.
And I am Commander Cockings, and we have a world exclusive today, Stuart.
That's right. We've been scouting around, I guess, kind of, and we found a ship. Which is a scout class vessel.
You have seen the bridge, those of you that are really keeping an eye out, but this is the first look at the exterior and all the views and the scale and classic Trekyards goodness, but it is a brand new ship. And Stuart, who designed the ship?
That would be our very own Commander Cockings, right here. So
It was designed for a fan film about 3.5 years ago, and that fan film paused, still yet to unpause. And so when these Trek short projects came about, that I'm currently raising money on Indiegogo for, so check it out if you like this ship. And Stuart, here is the USS Saya, the Saya class NCC 2154, a scout class that I modelled by my fantastic team, and I actually textured it myself.
So yeah, this is a nice little ship. Now it doesn't look very big, based on the size of the bridge module, but I'm sure we'll get to the size comparison soon. Yeah, so far I'm like, this is a fastest ship. It could be. It's very good.
It's definitely, this angle hides all of the changes because it looks more Connie classic than when you actually look around it. But I mean, that is the iconography, the design of the time. But yeah, we can go straight into the scale though, Stuart. So I've compared it to the thing you should compare it to.
Wow. I didn't expect it to be quite that small, but this falls almost in line with the Archer class, the USS Sagittarius, I believe, the very small little one, smaller than the Defiant, eh?
It's tiny compared to a refit, absolutely tiny. Although, and when comparing it to the Reliant, it doesn't feel as tiny, which shows you how drastic those mission profiles are and how that vibe is. The rationale behind the ship, the initial reason was first of all, the fan film may have built a real bridge set for this. And so it was designing a bridge that would be practical and much smaller. And we have a picture of that bridge, and you can see here that it is not of the same elaborate scope as the refit bridge, but still the same vibe. And so that was a big thing, was make it smaller. But then I kind of like that idea of going for a smaller design and beyond small in a sense. I really shrink it down. Because in my brain, this was Starfleet's very first attempt to do a runabout style. What the runabout would eventually become. This represents how small a fully functional starship can get in TMP era, and then the runabout represents how small it can get in the TNG era. They miniaturized heavily, but this is how small they got in this era. That's why it still feels tiny, but that is the smallest it can possibly be, and still be the full class of vessel as compared to a runabout. So this is the TMP runabout in my brain.
Wow, that's really interesting. I like that thought process.
The only caveat is that because it is smaller, it isn't heavy cruisers are heavy cruisers for a reason. They're using the NX-01 style porthole windows, which are more compact than the big TMP windows. And I say big in inverted commas. They're not huge, but they've got space to have big windows. So but the decks are the same height. The windows are just slightly smaller, which is important because I worked out deck height and it's some number of decks, etc. And
I know the name is important as well. Do you want to talk about the name real quick before we jump into the ship?
Yeah, so the Saya class named after my mum, Elizabeth Saya. Because it's a nicely could be anything name and has a kind of nice ring to it. And so yeah, I was like, I'm just going to dedicate this ship to my mum. And so yes, we'll see it fly in short number 2. There's actually quite a few visual effects shots of it, as you can imagine, and it looks pretty damn good in motion. It has a really nice taper to it and vibe. And when we start to get into those back views, you see how much is different, because obviously it is a TMP kit bash, but it isn't at the same time. It's because that whole area needs to be that fine line. But you'll start to see the functional differences and the functional needs. But what do you think vibe-wise in terms of like, did you buy my logic of this being as small as it can get and still be a runabout?
Yeah, I would say so. Like I said, when I first saw the first image, I thought, okay, it's small, but I thought it was a little bit bigger than this, at least. Miniaturization as far as you can take it, I guess. And I love that, yeah, you said that the runabout was like the TNG equivalent of shrinking it down even more as far as functionality goes.
It shows how far you can get. Because, I mean, those areas are meant to be very different in terms of technology. This, I think, references that quite well.
Have you worked out crew size for this thing yet?
Give or take, yes. And that's a good one if you go to the... Well, there's Indiegogo picture. There you go, guys. Support short treks.
Well,
or trek shorts.
I was going to say, you said short number 2, but on your Indiegogo, it's short number 1, family ties, because short number 0 is short number 1.
Yes, I always get confused by myself there. Sorry, short number 1, family ties, yes. We get to pilot that in a full Wathacon costume and pick up my dad, or save my dad in TOS. It was also short made for his mental health, I'll say that. He didn't have a very good time in quarantine, and we wrote this to kind of give him the extra bit of boost. So ironically, a ship named after my mum helps me go save my dad. Do you get family ties?
I was going to say, with the name Family Ties, is the Captain Alex P. Keaton. That's a 80s show, Family Ties, with Michael J. Fox.
Yes. No, but no, thank you for explaining.
Yeah, so go check out the Indiegogo guys and support if you can. They're really great stuff coming up, and I'm looking forward to seeing this ship and more. So
and as you can imagine, guys, if this is the detail we went to just for a single short, you can look at what else we're doing, all the levels of CG and sets and costumes, and all the actors involved. You can, it's a really cool project, and any amount of money helps, etc., etc. And Stuart's in one. He's in this one, in fact. So if you want to see Stuart, support Family Ties and support Indiegogo's the Trek shorts. But Stuart, the top view though, side and top always are different. And you asked about crew size. Well, that saucer really is only so big as a single ring of rooms and a single corridor. And so all of the saucer is the crew space, and all Signal Hill is everything else. Because it's a scout ship. It's not. I think we've got a very small sick bay room, a sick room, and they've got a reasonable sized warp core for this. They can miniaturize so much. It's a crew of 11, I believe, pretty small, and that's to work in shifts, etc. It can obviously, it's got a spare room to take dignitaries, because it's you look at the runabout and they would often say, oh, we'll quickly jump in it and go somewhere. Well, that's meant to be this. It's a runabout just of TMP, so they have a dozen of these on standby at Earth Space Dock at several different command bases, that if they quickly need a ship, it takes a lot of people to staff one of these bigger ships. Well, you can just throw in almost just an admiral's set of people that look after him, his entourage, and can fly one of these ships. So it's meant to be that sort of pick up and go sort of ship.
The one thing that comes to mind for me is the refit NX-01. It's kind of got that shape at the back,
okay.
Just from the top, it's got kind of that look. So I love that, because it actually was like pulling that design element forward. I don't know if you did that deliberately, but
yeah, it was more of a if you look at the half saucer Enterprise, that weird one with the nacelles that are stuck on the hull. That's also the inspiration for this, in that I thought, what would a TMP version of that be? So I went back from runabout, went forward from half saucer, and kind of met in the middle, because that one kind of felt compact. And if you're going scout ship, you're going for quick profile, and there's more to that we'll get into. But the back view is where we start to get the magic happen.
Well, it's got a lot of push. It's got a lot of impulse engines, which means it's probably highly maneuverable, which I like. Definitely redesigned nacelles. I saw those earlier. I was going to talk about those, but I figure we'll get to that eventually here. It does have a shuttle bay by the looks of it, and I assume one shuttle, 2 shuttles.
Well, it's got a parking garage. Let's not be as generous as say a shuttle bay.
It's got a parking space.
It's got a pod. Yeah, it's got room for a little pod, very little pod, just for if you need it. The escape pods are in the main hull. There's a few, but if you're on the bridge, you wouldn't. If the turbo lift's down, you wouldn't be able to get to the bottom of the ship. So the if you go into the turbo lift, which you can see, it rotates to the pod, and so that's why I have the bridge crew escaping.
That's really neat. I was going to ask about the turbo lift thing as well, because there's 2 turbo lifts on the bridge. No,
there is not. There's 2 doors on the bridge. There's one turbo lift, and the other actually goes directly to this back portion, which I really like. Which there is actually a full 3D corridor on there, the B deck, isn't it? So it goes all the way back. You can see that little window right at the back of the room, back of the corridor, and you've got on that back portion, right to the side of the window, because the window is the corridor. You've got the captain's ready room, and the bigger chunk is where the mess hall is, and that's quite a lot bigger. It's not huge or anything. I think it has enough room for three tables and chairs, so it's still pretty small. But yeah, so one turbo lift and 1 corridor with extra. Because I kind of like the idea of having that extended thing. This is so small, you literally can see where the room is. You can exactly see how big it is. There's no sort of ifs or buts when it comes to how big things are, which I quite liked. And I like the idea of if we ever really went high detail with the interiors, you could literally have the camera go up to that portion and be like, oh yeah, they're sitting, because it's that small.
I do like the integration of the impulse engines into the rear of that saucer. I love that redesigned saucer look. That would be fantastic on a bigger ship like the Connie. I think that would be really neat for a cool redesign. But you still maintain the shape of the impulse engines, which is really nice for the era. So
yeah, Nick fought me. The modeler fought me those aft impulse engines. He wanted to do something different for that, but I was like, no, I really like this. I think it's so simple and straightforward. Just where else are you going to put them? But it implies so much extra thrust by making all of the backwards areas be impulse drives, because it is meant to be extremely maneuverable. You know, this thing isn't combat rated in terms of it can't survive much, but it is a scout ship. It will be able to maneuver. Like I said, runabout. It's meant to be one of the most, well, the most maneuverable of its size, because there's nothing else of this size that can be fully warp capable. And a big part of why the nacelles are the way they are, because you noted the redesign, the warp grills take up the entire. That's the big redesign. The warp grills are the entire thing. They are extremely like a fraction from being like Defiant level overpowered. They're like as much tech as you can fit in, and also they're as close to the body and as in as possible for it to still look nice. And so the warp bubble is super efficient. That's why it's all down. So that's why it can go very fast, very quickly, for its size and relative dimensions. So everything's kind of like, it can't do much very long, but it can push everything to a high degree.
The only thing I would have changed personally is I would have slid the nacelles back a little bit further. Now, there's probably a reason that you have them so far forward, but just with the meeting point of the strut with the nacelle, I'm just not a huge fan of that.
Yeah, it was meant to be as close to the hull as looked acceptable, and it does look good in motion. I'm happy to say it does fit, and to give that, like I said, aesthetic to the warp delta, or the half saucer, should I say? But if you go to the next view though, the aft bottom.
And now we also found a torpedo launcher, which is great.
Yes, there ain't much ammo, but I was very keen that, because phasers have a limited yield with how much warp core power you have, but if you put a full-size torpedo here, that can be the top-level torpedo. And so that's the armament you need to make sure you have to just get out of a situation, have those like 3 aft torpedoes in the magazine, so that you can do a little bit of damage if you need it. Was my logic, you know?
Yeah. I do like the nacelle or the strut attachment points on the secondary hull. They're not as low as like a ship like the Belknap, which are on the bottom of the hull, but they're not like up where the Connie's is. So again, it has some of that FASA vibe, like some of the FASA ships have that into the side of the hull.
In fact, a very subtle thing, it's meant to be subtle, but I did talk to Andrew Probert about the design a couple of years ago, and I said, what do you think? And he was like, do you really want to know what I think? I was like, yes. No, in a good way, just like, you know, he wasn't there to look at the ship. I was kind of like, well, just throw me some things. But that's quite a big thing to ask a design like that. But I'm maybe having a good concept. Anyway. And the only thing he thought that he could recommend that would keep the design in keeping was, he said, and if you go back a step, the saucer impulse engines, because of, now there is clearing. There is clearing with the impulse engines and the pylons, but he said that would break the pylons over time, just because of the energy. It's not thrust literally, but just the gas. If you go back to this down picture, you can see that there is that distinct split between the connection point and the nacelles, because that is actually a thicker, chunkier part of the nacelle, and it's actually got, in Andrew's logic, it's got a separate impulse thrust coating of metal, and so it's a different color. And it's just a distinct, like, that's exactly the clearing that the thrust needs. So it's sort of like right on the T of the ship not working properly, but it's been built so it does work.
That's awesome, yeah. And good, Andrew. Can't go wrong with Andrew. He'll tell you like it is for sure. So, the only other suggestion I would make is that the registry number should probably be not mirrored. I just know somebody will point that out, so I just wanted to say it.
No, that was purely because of one shot. I had to do a thing. So that's just the way this version was.
And I do not really like the back of the warp chiller grills, so it doesn't like have the point shape, whereas you just extended the black. But it is a different nacelle design with smaller warp coils and stuff. So I buy it to look visually different. Not the hugest fan of that, honestly.
But the bottom view though,
this reminds me a lot of like the Nova class. It'd be actually interesting to see how big this is compared to the Nova class, to be honest.
Well, the Nova's the same size as the Defiant lengthwise, so it's just differently proportioned.
Is that another torpedo launcher on the bottom at the front?
It is.
I think so.
Same
yes.
logic.
Good.
Which I always quite like. I always quite like a little lower. I think that looks quite sweet. Its own like it doesn't stand out, but it's there. It's there.
And lower, well, I would assume 360 phaser ball turrets on the bottom of the secondary hull, which is also nice.
Do you think it works as a way it integrates?
Absolutely. People might complain that the deflector and the lower planetary sensor dome, the sensor dome is kind of...
There's clearing. There's clearing.
See, it doesn't look like it from this picture, but from the front, probably, yes. I knew you would account for that. I just wanted to also bring that up.
It's very, very specifically there is clearing. Don't worry.
You can tell from the size of the registry number and the phaser ball turrets, this is a small ship.
And those are to scale to the refit. These are the same phasable turrets. That tells you.
Perfect, yeah.
Which was very careful about keeping the same size. Yeah, this was a tricky one because I knew I didn't want certain things, and having it all be integrated in that like almost too busy front deflector area, but it's like you need a certain amount of tech there for the ship to work. But we found a balance actually. Now Andrew had a couple of little notes on what he may or may not have done, and we did a little bit of that as well. So it has everything you need, just really compact. But I really like how it incorporates into the shell those kind of multi-step levels. I think that looks rather nice. And there's even RCS thrusters in the deflector unit, which is just to give that extra little bit of.
I also like that you maintain the sensor band around the saucer rim, but not between a set of windows because there's not enough decks. So I love that you kept it, but yeah, and you didn't interrupt it with windows because that's not how sensor bands really work. So
yeah, we tried to keep everything logical. But if you go to the side view, here we have a direct, well, we're zoomed in so you can see clearer, and obviously we can see the windows, we can see the deck height, we can see there are actually stuff in the windows. I always like doing hero interiors, and it's really fun to see as you go by.
The only thing I would have done, honestly, is slide those nacelles back. Just like, ever so much. You know me, though, all about proportion, and just. But then it would change the look again, and in a like a top view, or if you're doing a silhouette look of it, it would look a lot like the Belknap or something like that if you did that as well. So I can see why maybe you did that, but
yeah, everything's a bit of aesthetic logic. It is a kit bash because that's the nature of the era, but it has a unique flow to it, but it still feels totally, oh yeah, obviously. You shouldn't do too much. Do you know what I mean? Like that very, very fine balance for this era. How do you think I did balancing it all?
Very good. Even the front of your nacelles, which we'll probably see in a minute here. I love that there's no split in the middle because they are so small compared to the regular size ones. So it's like one bizarre little scoop instead of two.
It's all there, just in a slightly different way. I even had
more compact package.
I even had Nick add the little tiny squares on the nacelle as a little square details on the refit one. But just go to the next view, top view.
And again, those little personnel hatches, because that's what those little squares are, for one person to come out of. You get a real sense of scale here, plus seeing the bridge module at the top. I really like that.
I did do a vague top, again, years ago. So if you think of, it's just sort of split up literally into like a ring and then little rooms. I mean, it is literally just a single room around it and then a corridor. But next view is another close-up. Just to kind of appreciate the details, all the little greeblies in the inner bits, and yeah.
Even the lower planetary sensor dome is different from the Connie because the two side ones kind of angle forward a bit more. Nice little subtle touches. Yeah, like
I mean, I won't take credit for the subtlest touches because that was Nick the modeler knowing it can't look the same. And broad strokes, he's those little things that, there you go. And then another view of the back, again, just a bit closer.
I love where the impulse crystal is. That's great. And I'd like to see what engineering looks like because you got to get the warp core in there, and so it's probably pretty efficient, I would say.
Good word, Stuart. Good word. And boy, the amount of time I spent just the aftest of bit, almost the tail, making sure those plates match the Connie, and then I shifted all the colours a little bit, so it was a little bit different. They're all individually built. It's annoying. But you haven't mentioned the docking port.
I was just about to, actually. I saw it early on. I think that's great. Again, it gives a real sense of scale, and yeah, I mean, perfect place for it because there's really not a lot of room on this one that you could do that, so especially on the secondary hull. But no, that's great. Again, it's like the Archer a little bit. The Archer class has it like on the side of the saucer, a very noticeable one. I love that little detail.
And this was the thing that Nick sort of fought against. He tried to remove it 2 or 3 times. I said, where's the docking port? Because he doesn't like asymmetrical designs, and this is asymmetrical. Because it literally is. I mean, you can see where the rooms are, the window. There isn't really any plating between the space and the people. And so, whereas in TMP, it's a lovely little internal hatch. The hatch is the outside of the ship. Like, literally, that's the airlock. And then there's another little tiny airlock. So most of it, you actually go into that layer, and then it swaps, and now you're inside the ship. So you could literally go right onto the corridor, the main corridor. So that is the airlock. It's just external. But I kind of like that. Like, it looks functional. We didn't have to add extra hull. Because if we had done that, it would just be a big, bulky bit. I like the implied detail level. And like seeing the glows and And all the colours on it match the Connie. I was very careful with the texturing and such. I didn't realise this until I did it, until he built the 3D. It's actually a ramp to get from that part of the ship to the bridge, because you can see there's a saucer. So there's literally just a whoop. It's just a little incline in the hull, which is great. It looks silly, but I love it.
I think I'd be very claustrophobic on this ship, personally. Can you imagine this one getting lost in the Delta Quadrant?
No.
Damn.
No, I can't. Well, not got lost in the Beta Quadrant. It's bad enough. Pretty far away. I think we did prioritise each quarters is the appropriate size. There's just few of them. So nothing's been compressed to the point of like Defiant level compactness, but there is no extra. And everything is like to the wall vibe, if that makes sense. So it'd be okay. Like, you wouldn't necessarily think the corridors are relatively normal size, so you would not think of any other ship. And you're like, oh, I've explored the entire ship. That took me 1 minute 10. It's like, yeah, there isn't that many rooms.
Yeah, I would think there'd be like maybe 1 or 2 turbo lifts at most in this thing, and then the rest is just ladders and Jeffries tubes. Because this is such a small ship, you don't need the turbo lift net per se. So
yeah, I mean, it takes seconds to get anywhere, as it does in a bigger ship as well, but literally seconds. I just like the fact that you can just walk the entire rim of the saucer very, very quickly if you wanted to. But guys, if you want to support seeing this ship in Trek Shorts, then Indiegogo is going on right now until the end of this month, May 2021. Anything does help me, help Stuart, help all these different fan filmmakers getting more films. You guys have seen what I do in CG and new digital sets, etc. You saw we teased the bridge. There's way more to see with that as well. You guys have been great so far, but we do need more help. We're not even close to our goal, as we're not even close to the end of the thing. You know, it's half and half, but help us out if you can.
And link will be in the description below, so just click that link to add onto the Indiegogo and support if you can.
But of course, end on the final shot of the ship, as we like to do. Any sort of closing thoughts?
No, just bravo. Keep up the good work. You always do fine design work, and you always have logical reasons for everything. It has to work in universe, and I love that. You will fight against things that don't make sense. So, but again, pointing out the split or non-split in the front of the nacelles. I had to do that with this picture because much smaller. So I like that.
Yeah. And do you wish the nacelles had been more different, had been less just Connie, or do you think that makes sense?
It makes sense. You did do a little bit of changes at the back as well. I probably would have done a little bit more at the back, personally. And like I said, just slid them back a bit. But that's how I would have made it some changes here. Other than that, the design is really, really quite amazing.
It's simple, though. TMP is a simple one. And this was definitely, it's really satisfying to see. This was literally years in the making, because I had my kit bash done, which I'm sure we'll do our full episode. I can show literally the TMP kit bash model and this side by side and how close and how much we developed it, because that was a really fun thing. Like, how do you make it different than the same? So if you guys want to see a full episode on the ship where we go through deck layout, we go through crew complement, we look at the bridge, I mean, there is more to look at, obviously, and maybe I can take you on a tour of the very few rooms.
Funny you said tour, because the whole time I'm thinking a 3-hour tour. This kind of reminds me of the SS Minnow from Gilligan's Island. Small little ship that you don't want to get stranded with. So
no, or fight any battles in, really, honestly.
And it wouldn't even take 3 hours to do a tour of this ship. I would imagine 3 minutes. There's this room, this room, this room. Here's engineering. Oh, look, there's the bridge.
And all the quarters are the same size, just shifted a little bit. Yeah.
It
would be fun to do the engineering room. That'd be fun to design.
The question is there a washroom?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
We haven't quite got to beaming it out technology yet, like we do in TNG. On that note, thanks. Wow.
No problem. Thank you for watching, guys. Like I said, if you can support the Indiegogo, the link is down in the description below, so click that. Also, while you're clicking, click that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Do all that fun stuff. Leave a comment down below definitely leave a comment. Let us know what you think about this design. And, if you can join us for our lives and stuff, that really helps us out. And if you want to see more stuff like this, like I said, go check the Indiegogo and also support the channel.
And yeah, just enjoy hopefully seeing it when the short comes out. It's a fun little story. Has Avalon Universe as a crossover, and Stuart's in it too. So what's not to love?
Exactly. So until then, guys, or until next time, I'm Captain Foley.
And I am Commander Cockings.
See you later.
Bye, guys.